Flurry here. Because we're wrapping up the summer, I can't believe the summer's almost over. This has been a very, very crazy year. But I wanted to do the TBR tag to kind of reassess my reading. I've been doing a lot of thinking because I'm so far ahead on my Goodreads goal. Like ridiculously far ahead on my Goodreads goal. I really want to prioritize some things for the second half of the year. And I think I'm going to do a goal video in early September that's just kind of reflect that a little bit more. But I wanted to do the TBR tag while I saw it and while I had a little bit of time. So we're going to start. The first question is, how do you keep track of your TBR pile? I have been collecting books since I was 5 years old. So I have a pretty impressive collection. And starting about 4 years ago, I started going to a lot of book conventions, so I have a lot of books. But recently, the whole TBR cart trend kind of started, so that's kind of how I pick my TBR. Like, I have a lot of books in my room. Like, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bookshelves and other. I have a lot of bookshelves in my room. Like, my room is all books. So basically what I do is I use one of my TBR cards is kind of like my main TBR card. Anything on the top part of that card is my TBR. And I can pull books from everywhere, but I do have a lot of ARCs. So I kind of try to prioritize the ARCs. But I definitely use my TBR card and my planner kind of as a guidepost. And normally what I do, I've been doing this a little bit more since lockdown. I've been doing themed reading vlogs for you guys. So I've been kind of choosing 4 or 5 books a week and kind of tackling that theme. But I normally do a random number generator and I'll kind of just pick 20 books and that's how I'll kind of pick. I also run a reading group on Facebook, which is called the TBR and Beyond Reading Group. And we have 2 books that we read every month for that. So, but I really use my TBR card as a guidepost. And then sometimes I kind of go off script. I also have been trying to get a little bit better at using my Kindle, which is always hard because it's just not physically there and I always forget about those books. But that's kind of how I choose my TBR. I would say I use my TBR card as my basis and how I store the first 20 books I want to read, and then I kind of I'll go off script if needed. Question that was asked is your TBR mostly physical or ebooks? And most of my books are definitely physical. I tend to do a lot of book shopping, a lot of discount book shopping as well, but I also go to a lot of book conventions. Normally every year I go to at least 2 big ones. I go to New York City Comic Con and BEA every year because I live in New York City and it's easy access. This year I wound up unexpectedly going to ALA, which got me so many more books than I ever got in my entire life. And then COVID happened, so everything else pretty much got canceled. Because everything got physically canceled, I have had a lot of ebooks come into my possession purely because of the COVID situation. So I got so many books on NetGalley that I just really need to remember that I have. But most of my collection is physical books. I'm also very good at getting rid of them. Once I read them, if I don't think I'm going to read them again or they're not signed or they're not personally attached to me, I love them so much, I will get rid of them. I will donate to my students. I will donate them places because I just can't keep all the books that I have. But I normally try to give them back to my students. So I normally have I lean more towards getting physical books because I have a way of giving them away to people like my students or friends or stuff. So most of my collection is physical books, but I do now have a pretty good ebook collection, and I do buy stuff on my Kindle. I do have a Kindle. I do use it. I actually have been getting it better at reading on my Kindle recently, and that was largely thanks to COVID because our library was closed. So a lot of the books I've been getting recently were books I was just waiting for, but most of my collection is physical books. The next question is, how do you determine which book from your TBR to read next? So this kind of goes into a little bit of my planning. Every month I choose about 15 to 20 books that I'm going to try to read. And normally I am a very, very seasonal reader. In the summer and the spring, I tend to read a lot of contemporary. In the fall, I tend to read a lot of creepy and, mystery themed books and also a lot of fantasy. And then in the winter, I tend to read a lot of fantasy. Those are kind of my genres, like when I read them. But I do read a wide range. I made it a goal to try to read at least 3 genres a month, and I think I have been doing pretty good with that. I have to go back and look. So normally what I do is whatever my genre is, if it's fantasy or something, and I normally kind of try to pick a couple books from that genre, and then I kind of, have a nice range of genres every single month, so I'm not reading only contemporary or only fantasy. I try to create a balance because I feel like if I read only fantasy, I'm just gonna get bored of fantasy. So I try to add like a couple. Like if I'm reading mostly fantasy, I'll like pick like 10 fantasy and then like 5 something else. And then what I do is normally if I'm like really really indecisive, I'll kind of just put all the numbers into a random number generator and I'll pick the book that way, or I'll have my friends and family pick a number, or I'll just pick the book that most is interest to me. And then when I'm planning my TBR, because I do tend to go to a lot of book conventions, I tend to have a lot of physical arcs, so I kind of look at like, oh, this book is coming out in September, so I should read it because it's coming out in September, and I should have a review ready for you guys. So it doesn't always work, I'll be honest. Like, I have books that I've had for years that I still haven't got around to reading, but I do try to prioritize the arcs that are coming out, but also the arcs that I'm most interested in. So sometimes those two don't always work, but I do try. So that's kind of how I pick my TBR. Right now, right during COVID, I've been kind of doing a lot of theme reading vlogs. So I've been doing like fantasy reading vlogs or like, Disney villain reading vlogs. So I've been kind of like doing a little bit of that just to kind of keep my reading game a little bit more unique. But yeah, that's how I choose my TBR normally. The next question was, what is the oldest book on your TBR? This is really, really hard. I have a majority of books in my collection that are from like the past, like 4 or 5 years. This book is at least 10 years old because I got this when I was in Wells, I graduated from Wells in 2010. It's 2020 now. So this book is at least like 10 years old. I remember I was at a bookstore, like where I went to college. I went to the Commons, they called it. And I remember I was just talking to her. And I remember I had bought 2 books. I had read the other one, but this was the next one that I bought. This is Street Magic, and this follows Briar. And it's the sequel series to The Circle Opens. This is the second book in that series, but this is a book I've had for like a while. I actually tried to read it before and I got like really, really distracted. But I really hope to read it. It's actually super short and I really, really like these characters a lot. But this is the book that I remember physically buying the longest. A lot of my other books are between the last like 4 and 5 years. That's when I really started doing BookTube and buying a lot of books and that stuff. So this is the book I remember having the longest, and I bought this like in 2009 or 2008. So what is the book that you most recently added to your TBR? And I did get a gift box from Simon, and it included Shine by Jessica Jung. And this is a K-pop themed novel written by someone who was in K-pop. This comes out in October, and I really hope that I get around to reading it. It sounds super fun. And I read one, I think it was by Marine Gu. I really like that one. I know some people had some issues with it, but I wound up really, really liking it. So I hope that this one is equally as fun and exciting as that one. I love books about bands. I think that they're so fun about singing and stuff. So K-pop is not my genre of music, but my students love it. So if I can like read this and kind of pass it on to them, they might enjoy it even more than I will. But I'm really excited to dive into this read as well. What book is on your TBR just because it's pretty? And that's this one. Sarah J. Maas, Crescent City. This book is really, really pretty. The end papers are pretty. It was signed. So I'm like really curious like if I'm actually going to like it, because I really have some mixed feelings about her writing. I wound up really liking the Thorn of Glass series. I wasn't the biggest fan of her other series. I've heard people have really thoroughly enjoyed it, but this book is like, I think it's like close to 900 pages, this book, or close to 800 pages. So right now it's very, very nice. I really should have read this during COVID because I would not have had to bring it to work. But this might be like a summer read or something, or maybe I read like a chapter or something, because it's very, very massive. I don't think I would necessarily bring this to school, but it is very, very pretty. It is a little bit indifferent. It's like, what book is on your TBR that you don't ever plan on reading? And I honestly don't know. I buy books because I want to read them, but maybe like my specialty editions of something. Like if I have a lot of copies of Harry Potter, maybe I wouldn't read like my illustrated editions. I don't really know, because I think like I eventually would just kind of like get rid of the books that I don't want to read, which does happen like I do it like 2 times a year. I kind of like go through my books, and I'm actually planning on doing a big clean out this month. Actually, I'm gonna kind of go through all my books in the shed and really kind of pare down what I actually have, because I have a lot. But I don't know. I buy books because I want to read them. So maybe I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I can't think of a book like right off my head that I won't read. Um, that I can think of. I got rid of all my Twilight copies, and I probably won't be buying Midnight Sun, but those covers are pretty. So I don't know. That's kind of, and like maybe some people will buy Twilight and not read it. I don't know, but that I don't really have an answer for this question. Sorry, guys. Next question is, what are some unpublished books on your TBR that you're excited for? And this will definitely be featured in my fantasy TBR for the fall. But Fable by Adrienne Young and Golden Fury by Samantha, I can't remember her last name, but Fable and the Golden Fury are 2 books from Wednesday Books that I'm really excited for to actually already have them. They're on my Kindle. I just haven't got around to reading them yet, but they're fantasy books that are high on my fall TBR. And the next question is, what are some books that everyone has read but you, or it seems like everyone's read but you? Definitely Crescent City. I will say Crescent City is one that a lot of people have read, but I haven't. But also The Hating Game by Sally Thorne is one that everyone has really, really liked. And recently I've noticed a lot of people have been reading the City of Brass series by S.J. Chakraborty. This book is high on my fall TBR as well. But these are 2 books that everyone has been talking about, and I have not yet read. But they are on my TBR, so that's a step in the right direction. Question is, what is some books that people always recommend to you? And I have one friend who, her name's Tiffany, hi if you're watching this, she recommends me a lot of historical fiction, so she winds up always recommending me They Went Left by Monica Hesse and The Girl in the Blue Coat by Monica Hesse. I have a lot of friends that read a lot more historical fiction than I do, and they've been really adamant that I read these books, so these are some that have been constantly recommended to me, and so much so that I went out and bought a physical copy of this one and then just had an ARC of this one, so these are 2 books that are high on my winter TBR. So that's normally when I tackle books that are a little bit more emotional, and these are ones that are high on that list. So hopefully I get around to reading them soon. Is, what is one book that you cannot wait to read that's on your TBR? And for me, it is Today, Tonight, Tomorrow by Rachel Lynn Solomon. I just picked this up as an early birthday present to myself. I really am excited for this one. This book has some of my favorite tropes. I love books that has like a game type element. I love books that take place in one day. I love books that's like enemies to lovers, and I think that this is like going to check all those little boxes. And I love books themed around graduation as well. This book sounds so cute. Heather from Bookables really, really liked it, so I had to pick it up. And blue is my favorite color, so yeah. And the last question is, how many books do you think are on your TBR? I have no idea. I really don't. I would say in this room, I have at least like 300 to 400, I would say. In my shed, I don't even know. But I would say I have like at least 1,000 book collection, easy. But again, they don't all stay. My permanent collection of books is probably more like 100. But the books that I'm like in the middle of reading or get from, conventions and stuff like that, it's probably closer to 1,000. So yeah, I hope you guys like this TBR tag. Let me know if there's any other tags below that you want me to do. And I'll try to add them to the rotation. And I hope you guys are staying safe and being well. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.